If you're like most people, your idea of a cocktail is something like a martini or an old-fashioned. You don't usually think of weapons. But for almost a century, the Molotov cocktail has been one of the most iconic weapons of resistance. A simple, easily made flaming bottle that underdogs the world over have lobbed at authorities and invading armies. Now, the Molotov cocktail was not invented by Molotov, and it's obviously not something that anyone should drink. So where did it come from, and how did it get that name? That's what we're talking about on today's show.
We choose to go to the moon.
The rum-tum tugger is a curious cat.
100 billion other galaxies.
Right now, you like me.
Welcome to 5 Minute Trivia, where we're making the world smarter 5 minutes at a time. I'm your host, R.M. Zubairi. On September 1st, 1939, Germany invaded Poland to trigger the start of World War II. But just 3 months later, the Soviet Union started its own war. Not with Germany, that would come later, but with Finland. On November 30th, 1939, the Soviets invaded Finland. Finland had once been part of the Russian Empire, but after the 1917 Russian Revolution, Vladimir Lenin's Bolsheviks took over. The new Soviet Union granted Finland its independence. But then Joseph Stalin came to power in 1938. He thought Finland posed a threat to the Soviet Union because the city of Leningrad was only 20 miles from the Finnish border. So Stalin decided to take it back. But the Russians didn't just go in guns blazing. That would have been uncivilized. No, they asked nicely if Finland would please just give their country to Russia. Finland said no.
Ugh, rude.
Yeah, I know. So then they went in, guns blazing. But before they did that, the Soviets signed a treaty with Germany that placed Finland into the Soviet Union's sphere of influence. The treaty was called the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. It was named for the foreign ministers of both the Soviet Union and Germany. Molotov was the Soviet foreign minister. When Soviet forces invaded Finland, they had already talked themselves into victory. They had a puppet government all ready to go, and even had the composer Dmitri Shostakovich write a celebratory piece of music to be played by marching bands as the Red Army paraded, victorious, through Finland's capital of Helsinki. The war was supposed to be over in 6 weeks, but it did take Russia a little longer to completely get their butts handed to them by Finland. Yeah, that's right. Russia lost. No victorious marching bands, no puppet government. So what happened? Now, the war started with an aerial bombing campaign over Helsinki. When the world condemned that, Minister Molotov said that the Air Force was not bombing the Finns, but rather airdropping food supplies to the starving population. The Finns referred to the cluster bombs that were leveling their cities as Molotov breadbaskets. They also responded to Molotov by giving him, quote, a drink to go with his food parcels. They called it the Molotov cocktail. This was a relatively simple improvised weapon made from a glass bottle filled with flammable liquids and sealed with a wick. Now, they didn't invent the idea, but the name stuck, and it really worked. It was the most potent anti-tank weapon they had. In keeping with the cocktail theme, Finland's national brewery, the Alko Corporation, switched from making vodka to mass-producing Molotov cocktails, and even supplied matches to light them. They produced over 500,000 bottles. Officially, Finland called Molotov cocktails burn bottles, and there are a few different names depending on where in the world you're throwing them. They've been used in lots of places, but Soviets and Russians have gotten the lion's share thrown in their direction. In Finland, in Czechoslovakia during the Prague Spring, and now in Ukraine. But anywhere an underdog is taking on a superior fighting force, you can be sure they're serving a drink to go with the food. That's this week's show. Join us next time, and thanks for listening.